Hello and welcome to the Monday, March 28th, 2011 City Council Informational. We'll call the meeting to order. We'll start off with our City Council staff report with Deborah A. Owen, City Clerk, Chief of Council Operations.
Hey there, good afternoon, Sioux Falls City Council. A couple of updates regarding, first, tomorrow, the forum for the Northwest District candidates will begin at 6:30 here at the Carnegie Town Hall. It will be broadcast live and web streamed at siouxfalls.org. In addition, we've been receiving questions from the general public, and they can call those in prior to at 367-8080, or they can call those questions in live too tomorrow night, and we can get those questions to the question sorter of the League of Women Voters, who will be moderating that event, and Ann Thompson will be our moderator. Also, you can submit your question to clerks, CLERKS, at siouxfalls.org for those who are listening. We look forward to a great event and look forward to hearing from the candidates. It should be a lot of fun. In addition, we had our working session last Tuesday where we were talking about the possibility of having a gathering for the public to ask questions of a City Council forum regarding the Event Center, and that is coming together for April 5th, next Tuesday. I'll let the details come from leadership, but just to give you the update on things that we were working out, Madeline Shields will be our moderator, and it will be a 5:30 to 6:45 open house in the Link, and that is at the Orpheum. That's that central kind of lobby area. And then we'll have a 7 p.m. to 8:30 forum with a panel discussion that will all take place in the Annie Zabel Theater or studio. And council will be there along with consultants from that project. And I believe that is all I have. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Deborah. Any questions for Deborah? We can discuss that forum as well during open discussion if you'd like, or we could talk about it now if there's questions, but we could cover that again in more detail. Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to our audit committee update. Rich Oaksel is in the audience. Rich, are you going to give us an update on some of the audit reports that were done just recently?
Yes, I had a request in, I think, for the second Monday and the fourth Monday in April to present the three reports that were approved by the committee.
Gotcha.
Okay. They were the follow-up on recommendations, audit recommendations, the Railroad Relocation Fund, and the, I'm drawing a blank, but there are three reports.
On the zoo.
The zoo, right, the Great Plains and the Delbridge Museum.
Okay, so again, you're going to be giving us that final update really when?
Yeah, there will be two reports, I think, on that second Monday I requested, and then the other report will be on the fourth Monday in April.
Okay.
So, that's just because there are other things going on the first and the third Monday, so, okay.
Any questions of Rich before he gets too far on that? Okay, thanks, Rich. Okay, now we'll go into City Council open discussion. Anybody have anything? Councilor Oppenbach?
I just wanted to follow up on the April 5th event.
Sure.
Do we have we confirmed all of the consultants to be there and as part of that open house part ahead of the forum?
I could answer a little bit of that, and we'll rely on Deborah. I did have a conversation with Mark Cotter. The only group that isn't quite secure is the people doing the economic impact, partially because they weren't sure they would really have much to contribute because they're not finished. But perhaps they could learn something from us and hear what questions we might have prior to them finishing their report, but they're kind of in the middle of it. So, but I still think we can get them here if we want them. And that's certainly up to us. I think if we think there's some value in having them hear from us and or even possibly the public on what they would like. But I would think that they're already in the process of doing their report. How they are doing it probably isn't going to change. But maybe there's questions we have about what they're doing that we could get before we wait and get their final answer, I guess.
I guess speaking only for myself,
Yeah.
I would appreciate having them here.
Okay, I think, well, we just need to make sure the group thinks the same way, and I don't think there's any objection. It's just that they may not be able to contribute like some of the others.
No, I understand
Okay.
that. I appreciate the give and take that's I envision coming out of this, and I think they may have things, as you said, things to learn. So I would like them to be here.
Okay, we'll make sure that they get that word. Councilor Brown, did you have something? Okay. One of the things I think we're going to be working on our press release about this topic, and so we're trying to figure out just how we want to frame it. And some of the conversations that I've had with a few councilors and others today is that this is a great chance for the council to finally have the public participate in this discussion with us, and that there's questions that they may have about the process. They may have questions they want answered from us about what we know and what we're doing, but as well for us to ask questions of these experts in a different setting than the informationals that we've received. So it's a whole different setting, but it's a unique chance now for the public to finally get involved in talking to us as a group about the event center, which we haven't had. So I think that's kind of a good idea. I mean, maybe overdue, but still, this is a good chance to do that. So we kind of want to make sure we get the public aware of this and involved. Does that seem reasonable, though, to frame it in that manner? Councilor Rolfing?
I would agree with you 100%. We need to, I think this will be one of, hopefully, many of these that we're going to have so that the public is completely involved in this process, knows what's happening with the surveys or whatever you want to call it, the studies that are happening, so that these can be presented and then they can ask questions of how, why, when, where, that kind of thing going forward, and know exactly what is happening with this process. We just need to keep them informed and allow them to be part of the process. Yes, definitely.
Okay. And I would think after the April 18th final presentation of the plan from the mayor and his staff, that there would be a time again to do another.
Maybe one or two after that. Yep.
Right. It's really crafting the message out so that we invite the public to participate in the conversation and to let us know as a council what they're thinking. We just haven't had that.
Exactly.
Okay. And then again, the timeline of the 5:30 to 6:45 to kind of have an open house and have all the professionals with, like they did at Morningside, a similar presentation or similar demonstration of the information, in an hour and a half with Madeline. And would we have Madeline kind of going through the crowd with a mic versus having just one mic up front? Okay, so that it's not as intimidating. An hour and a half is the time allotted. If we need less, because we can work with that, I think. Any other questions about? Yes.
I was only going to say that will be broadcast live too from the Orpheum. We won't have the ability to web stream it, but it will be broadcast live.
So be on your best behavior, I guess. Any other questions about that? Deborah, any other follow-up that needs to be done?
No, we're just going to firm up, I think, later this week about the format, and we'll do that on Wednesday, and we'll let you all know. I think leadership and anybody's welcome to attend that, but to make sure that we kind of have a clear agenda, you know, we're going to have an opening and closing and those kinds of details that we'll work on and get those out to all of you. Thank you.
Okay, and I would suppose our most important task at hand coming soon is the appointment of the new counselor. I see several in the audience here tonight. I'm meeting with one of the counselors, or candidates, I should say. Freudian slip, maybe. After this meeting, so if there's other counselors who would like to maybe interact with some of the candidates, there's a chance here. I think we've got the forum all handled. We're good there. Councilor Rolfing.
I have a question on the format that came out that I didn't hear us discuss entirely during our meeting last Thursday, and that is, I heard I saw in that was something was sent out about rebuttal to the questions, and I guess I didn't hear us discuss that part of it. I was thinking more along the lines of just a question and answer forum rather than a rebuttal kind of thing.
Now, this is the council forum with the League of Women Voters.
Right, and but in the notes that were sent out to us, there was the word rebuttal and that kind of thing, that there would be a 30-second or minute rebuttal and that kind of thing. I'm wondering about that from the standpoint of, I guess I was thinking more there along the lines of a question being answered and having all four just answer the question, rather than it being somebody answer a question and then rebuttal kind of situations, less of a debate and more of an question-answer situation.
Great comments, Councilmember Rolfing. And I think what that's primarily going to be used for is to clarify maybe what they said. I think with the legislative coffees, there was the desire to hear a follow-up to their comment. And so because there are four people who will be talking, it won't be like this two people debating back and forth. But I think the intent is to give them time to follow up or clarify their comments in 30 seconds or less.
You mean after they have given their first comment?
To answer the question, and then everybody will have a chance to answer the question, and then there'll be just that follow-up in terms of a rebuttal, but you can't really rebut all four or all three other people, so it's more of a clarifying or more of a follow-up with what they said to make sure
that they get everything in?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
The word rebuttal didn't, okay.
Okay, any other items? Seeing none, we'll move into our presentations. We'll start off with an update on Lewis and Clark Rural Water System. Troy Larson is here, the Executive Director of Lewis and Clark. Welcome, Troy.
Council Chairman Jameson, members of the council, thank you for the invitation to be here and provide an update. It's been a couple years, so I certainly appreciate that opportunity. First, wanted to introduce our chairman, Red Arndt, in the back row here. He has been our chairman for a number of years. He's from Laverne, Minnesota, and has been involved in the project since 1990 when his hair was red. So he's got a lot invested in this project. What I'd like to do in the limited time that I have is spend about 7 minutes providing you with an update, and then the balance of the time answering any questions that you may have. First of all, overall construction of the entire system is just past the halfway point. Construction of the water treatment plant is scheduled to be completed in late March 2012. However, before water can be delivered to the first 11 members in 2012, we need to award 2 projects this spring. The first project is for 3 meter houses. Originally that was supposed to be 4, but you'll hear how 1 is being deferred. These 3 meter houses include meter houses for Sioux Falls' second connection on Benson Road, as well as Parker and Beersford. The city already has 1 connection in the water tower being constructed along 85th Street. The second project is for what's called pipeline commissioning, and that is to flush and disinfect the pipelines that have been installed so that they can deliver treated water. We have previously stated in the media and elsewhere that Lewis and Clark needs an estimated $6 million in fiscal year 2011 to complete these 2 projects and cover administrative expenses. Unfortunately, Congress has not yet passed the 2011 budget. So even though we started the fiscal year on October 1, we're still in the dark about our final funding number. The current continuing resolution expires on April 8th, and there is no indication that they are close to resolving their differences. We received $10 million in fiscal year 2010, so that likely would be the highest number we would receive in fiscal year 2011. But unfortunately, that does not sound probable that we would receive $10 million. The President proposed $2 million for Lewis and Clark in the 2011 budget, so hopefully that is the lowest number that we'd receive, or somewhere in between. Because of the timeliness of needing to advertise those two projects I mentioned earlier, needing to advertise them in April to ensure that they are completed by the time the plant is operational in March 2012, Lewis and Clark simply couldn't wait any longer for Congress to do its job. A funding task force was organized that consists of members of the Lewis and Clark Board of Directors, engineers, and staff, including Sioux Falls City Engineer Chad Heavey. The purpose of this task force is twofold. First, to look at the steps needed to ensure that we can deliver water by 2012. Second, to look at possible alternative funding options to ensure we can connect the remaining 9 members in a timely manner. In terms of the first part, the 2012 deadline, I'm pleased to announce that the Board of Directors last Thursday approved a series of recommendations from the funding task force that will allow Lewis and Clark to advertise these 2 projects in April. These recommendations freed up an estimated $6.1 million, which includes deferring construction of the meter house for Minnehaha Community Water Corp. On the southeast side of Sioux Falls. I mentioned that earlier, so instead of 4 meter houses, there'll just be 3. While there were some savings and budget underruns identified, the majority of the $6.1 million comes from redirecting engineering fees from design of future pipeline projects or delaying the planned construction of projects such as the Minnehaha Community Water Corp. Meter House. What we're basically doing in order to award these 2 projects is robbing Peter to pay Paul. In some cases, this will end up costing us more in the long run. For example, we had completed approximately $45,000 worth of work involving getting title and appraisal work for easements in Iowa and Minnesota that will need to be repeated in the future since that work has a very limited shelf life. So freeing up this money does come at a cost. In addition to the increased cost, another concern we have is that by making these tough decisions and figuring out a way to move forward, that Lewis and Clark will somehow be penalized in terms of lower funding in the FY11 budget and possibly the 2012 budget as well. Unfortunately, we had no choice due to needing to advertise these projects in April. So bottom line, despite congressional delays with the proverbial baling wire and duct tape, we figured out a way to cobble this together and ensure Lewis and Clark can deliver water by 2012 to our first 11 members, including Sioux Falls. Looking ahead, the President has proposed a paltry $493,000 for fiscal year 2012, which only covers about half our annual administrative expenses. So that will bring new construction to a screeching halt if that number is eventually approved. It will not, however, impact construction currently underway. The remaining federal cost share is $194 million, which means the federal government has paid 51% of their cost share. That number was $188.6 million last year, so the price tag for the taxpayers went up $5.4 million in just 1 year due to inflation. By contrast, the 3 states and 20 members have prepaid a combined $153.5 million, which equals 99.7% of their combined cost share. We are hopeful we will receive at least $2 million in the FY11 budget, which would allow us to carry over some funding to next year and provide enough resources to at least put the project on hold without needing to borrow money. However, putting the project on hold is not something the board wants to do. The members have prepaid their share of the project and have critical water needs that need to be addressed. Plus, Sioux Falls and the first 10 members receiving water will pay far more for the water at the start since they will be covering all the costs to operate the treatment plant. That cost is shared by a bigger pool when all the members are connected. Borrowing money is not something the board wants to do. However, the board may find itself in the future where it feels it has no choice but to borrow money in order to connect the remaining 9 members in a timely manner. Lewis and Clark staff and attorneys will be writing a memo for each of the 20 members that outlines the members' commitments and legal obligations to complete the project, as well as the pros and cons of some of the alternative funding options that have been discussed. We hope to have that memo ready in the coming weeks. In the meantime, whenever you see members of our tri-state congressional delegation, in addition to thanking them for their past support, please encourage them to do everything possible to restore funding for the project. Unfortunately, we have Democrats blaming the Republicans for the broadly worded earmark ban that includes authorized projects like Lewis and Clark. And Republicans are blaming the Democrat administration for failing to propose adequate funding for the project. In my humble opinion, this is one of those rare instances where they're both right. Rather than pointing fingers, though, we need our tri-state congressional delegation to work together to figure out a solution. On that note, questions?
Councilor Brown.
Troy, thanks for being here.
You bet.
We prepaid our $70 million. So are we going to have to pay more than that, or is it just still an unknown at this point?
That's an unknown. If Lewis and Clark does need to borrow money, we have been told we can use future federal funds to repay principal, but not interest. So if we borrow money, that automatically would mean more cost to the members in terms of the proportional share of the interest. And then our hope would be that the federal government continues to pay their share so that we can use future federal funds to repay the principal. However, I know the city has a experience with the levee project, and waiting for the promised federal funding is certainly not guaranteed. Our legislation that authorized Lewis and Clark provides a federal funding commitment, and that's where I get these numbers, the remaining federal cost share. Unfortunately, the legislation that authorized Lewis and Clark does not provide a timeline of when that money needs to be paid. So there's a bill out there of an unknown duration that the federal government needs to pay.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Troy? Troy, if I could, does Sioux Falls need to buy that water? Do they have to buy it even if they don't need it?
That's a good question. Every member has agreed contractually to purchase at least 25% of their reserve capacity. In Sioux Falls' case, that's 25% of the original 11 million gallons. That does not include 25% of the additional 17 million gallons that the city reserved. And the reason for that is Lewis and Clark needed to two things: generate a minimum amount of revenue to cover the expenses to operate the system, but also needed to have at least a minimal amount of water going through the system to keep the water as fresh as possible. So it's 25% of each member's reserve capacity, whether you need it or not. Now, if you don't want to take the water, you're not going to be forced to take it, but you'd still have to pay for it. So presumably you would take it.
Well, I know there's a lot of discussion about the funding. Seems interesting that Sioux Falls at least kind of has their ducks in a row, and prepaying that money back when we did was a huge deal, and to get as far as we have. But it seems like we just got there. For all those other communities whose future is in question, is kind of it's a problem for us because we may have to pay more for the water because of the treatment. But beyond that, do we have any other kind of obligation or any other performance that we need to do as part of our agreement?
That will be part of the memo that will be forthcoming in terms of the contractual obligations of all the members to finish the project. So rather than getting into the nitty-gritty detail, I think that would be best explained in the memo.
Councilor Rolfing.
I'm coming to the conclusion that some of this money is just going to dry up, and so this group that you had put together, the funding task force, my understanding they're looking for alternatives to take care of this, and what are some options that they're going to come up with?
Sure. I mean, they're looking at rural development loans, either directly from rural development, or rural development has a guaranteed loan program. Bonding might be an option. Sitting tight and doing nothing for a few years and seeing how things shake out on the federal level will be an option. So, it's not that we're going to rush in and, hastily make any decision to borrow money. That's the last thing we want to do. But if we also need to make sure that we are making progress to connect the remaining 9 members in a timely manner. You have communities like Worthington and Sheldon, Madison that have prepaid millions of dollars, and I can't speak for them, but I would think sitting idle for 3 years and not making any progress probably is not too attractive to them. On the other hand, paying more just because the federal government is not honoring their commitment also does not leave a good taste in the mouth. So it's some tough decisions that we will have to make. And the funding task force I mentioned, it only makes recommendations to the full board. The board ultimately has the power to make the decisions whether we borrow funding or not. If we do borrow money, it certainly wouldn't happen in the next few months. That's a decision that likely would be first part of next year at the earliest.
Anyone critical on the list that needs the water?
There are a couple communities. Hull, Iowa is one that comes to mind that has some critical water needs. In the past, Lincoln Pipestone Rural Water has been in that situation. Worthington has some critical water needs. So it's a situation where right now with the wet weather we've had, there maybe isn't that critical need with all the members. But if we have an extended drought here, which we're probably due for one, I think that'll change a lot of things. I certainly, growing up on a farm, I wouldn't want to wish a drought on anybody. But that certainly would open the eyes, I think, of Congress of the critical need to get these members connected in a timely manner.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilor Anderson.
Troy, I want to jump back to the water treatment plant. Right now, that's scheduled to be online in 2012?
Correct.
No financing issues there at all?
Right. Any construction we currently have underway, we already have the financing for. We work through the Bureau of Reclamation, and they do not let us award any contracts until we have the funding for it. That's why I mentioned any problems we're having with the 2011 or 2012 funding does not impact any construction currently underway.
What communities do we already provide water to?
Right now, we only are providing water through 2 emergency connections where we are buying water, in one case from Sioux Falls, and reselling it to T in Harrisburg. And then we're also buying water from Sioux Center and reselling it to Hull, Iowa. That's a 9-mile stretch. So right now, the only water we're providing are temporary water sources.
Thank you.
Councilor Erpenbach.
Troy, can you talk a little bit about the politics of water for a minute? I don't want to downplay the importance of Lewis and Clark in this area. It's a huge deal, I understand that. But we are a small cog in the water production of this country. Do we need to be concerned about how the aquifers south of us are losing water faster than we are and not recharging as quickly as we are? Do we need to be concerned about competing in Congress against the folks the congressional delegations that represent areas above those aquifers? And do we need to think bigger picture than just our piddly 70 million? Do we need to think bigger than that to make Lewis and Clark successful?
That's a fair question, and one I guess we hadn't thought that globally in terms of casting the net out wider. So that's certainly something we may need to look at in terms of doing something to raise the profile, because we believe so profoundly that this is such a critical project that it's often frustrating for us that why can't those leaders on Capitol Hill see what we see so clearly. So
I just think, if I might, if I could put myself in a congressional seat from Nebraska or Missouri or Kansas, and I look at you draining my aquifer, you taking away the river water that I'm going to count on in the next 10 years, I'm not going to be in favor of voting for Lewis and Clark. That's my concern overall, is this is a small piece in a huge water issue that I'm afraid that by being so concerned about our little bit of funding, and I know it's not a little bit to us, but
Sure.
it is in the whole big picture, it's a little bit, that we need to think bigger than we are now, because we're going to be in dire straits, and so will those folks, and they're not going to vote for us when they're in worse situation than we are.
And that is a fair question. We have not heard any concerns to date about the amount of water we're taking out. That doesn't mean they're not there, but we have not been told of that. The amount of water that we will pull out of the aquifer represents less than 0.3% of the average daily flow. And so it's a very small amount, but I realize if you have enough projects like Lewis and Clark, that adds up. But it doesn't seem that the limited amount of water is the issue. It's more competing interests. The high-speed rail is now something we're competing with in terms of infrastructure that we never thought we would have to compete with in terms of an interest.
And I don't want to belabor it, but I would just say, and I would plant this thought, and I'm going to want to hear from you again, that if we don't have water to drink, the high-speed rail won't matter.
I would agree 100%.
Thanks.
Troy, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes, Chad, if you've got something,
Chad Heavey with the Engineering Division of Public Works. I just wanted to comment that we have Troy scheduled to be here, I believe it's the last Monday of each quarter as we go through 2011. So,
good. Councilor Brown.
Are you our representative on the board, or is Kevin Smith now?
I am.
Okay. As of when?
July,
Okay.
probably. And I will also comment in regards to that we have a private counsel also that we work with as far as Lewis and Clark goes, and a consultant that we work with.
Mr. Greenfield, who's come before us,
Yes.
is still our counsel?
Yep. And then Steve Burian with AE2S, who does our rate modeling also. We use his resources as well.
Very good.
Chad, if I could, anybody else have something for Chad? How's our water supply?
Well, I think you guys, through the capital program, we've done several improvements at our water treatment plant that's ongoing. We've done projects in the well field and projects in our distribution system. I think to prepare us for the future, and like Troy said, we've had bountiful amounts of water as we've went through the last few years. So I think the things that we've done, our water supply is pretty good. But I mean, if it is that time for a drought, we're going to be needing Lewis and Clark, maybe sooner than we need. For sure, we'll need them, in the future. But I think it's important that we have that treatment plant running and water in 12.
So water by March of 12 is right? Is that what date I heard?
Oh, I think it'll be, the treatment plant will be up and running. There's a lot of coordination that's got to go on with starting up a system like this as far as the water plant and the line. And so I would think we'll have water April, May up to us. So
it just seems a little. Seems a little odd that we'd be working so hard to get water here when we're not dying of thirst, so to speak, and there's other communities that aren't going to have access to this later. I'm just wondering if are we doing the right thing by? Well, maybe I'll think offline a little more, but thanks, Chad. Okay, our next item for presentation is an update on the African American History Museum by Carl Tier, Chair of the South Dakota African American History Museum Group. Welcome.
Thank you very much. and we thank you on behalf of the museum for allowing us to share a bit of time with you today. Today, I really wanted to just give you a quick overview of some proposed ideas on a move that would allow us to move from our current house, which is at the Multicultural Center in Sioux Falls, the atrium of the Multicultural Center, to the Washington Pavilion. And so if you would allow me to just take a few minutes to run through a little bit of history and bring you current. All right. So primarily, our organization has been around since 2009. And, wow. Guess my eyesight's not what I used to think it is. So we can go ahead. Just click it, or there you go. Basically, the objective of the museum is to interpret, research, and articulate various aspects of the African American history for the state of South Dakota. And we want to actually utilize resources that are already here within the state. Primarily, we want to be able to use those in 3 actual areas. And our exhibits that we have currently begin with the 1700s, and they'll take us into the present time. The 3 primary areas of the museum, our focus is educational resource, institution for history and research, and outreach to South Dakota and surrounding communities. In other words, to take the information that we're gaining and to be able to utilize it in an outreach approach to make people aware of some of the past historical relevance, as well as utilize them in the classrooms. Some of the partnerships that we've been involved with over the last few years would involve a list of educational institutions here in the state of South Dakota, as well as Tuskegee and areas in northern South Dakota as well. Primarily, we look at the history of the museum, and what we're trying to accomplish is through the ongoing research, we'll be able to detail various aspects of history that's been omitted through mainstream educational processes. We plan to network, and we are networking with long-term residents of South Dakota and to gain new insights. We also will be utilizing historical data and media to further the scope of the museum. Kind of our vision statement is, when individuals understand their history and culture, it empowers them to fulfill their potential and contribute to a larger society. And below that reflects the timeline from 1400 to present day of the 4 areas in which the museum has relevance. To further that vision, when the larger society understands their history and cultures, it leads to a community of diverse individuals that have a mutual respect and understanding for one another. And when you have that, you have a community that excels educationally, where high achievement is a standard, not the exception. By preserving and learning from our history, we will inspire generations. This is just a brief highlight of some of the exhibits, which start with the Lewis and Clark expedition with York, Aunt Sally, Buffalo Soldiers, Sully County. These are the current exhibits that we have at the museum. Oscar Michaud, Cleveland Abbott, Bud Adams, Kenny Anderson, Nate Love, the Black USO, and the 85th Aviation Squadron. And we'll actually go quickly through these. I don't want to spend any time on those, actually. What we've been in conversation with, and we do have a few of our board members here today, and we also have Larry Tull with us from the museum, is what we've proposed and would like to be able to do is to utilize a space that's currently at the museum, or excuse me, at the Washington Pavilion. There's actually 2 walls in one of the main corridors that we've spoke with and begun to get some price estimates on what the work would cost. But the project would be to relocate the museum as it is now to the Washington Pavilion, and it would require us to install sheet rock. It also would require us, now if we'll go back to the bus thing, it also require us to go to have sheet rock and glass exhibits to hold the exhibits that we'd have there. And it'd be on one side of the wall, on the north side of the wall, there'd be a 40-foot length of glass with mirrored background, which would also be 7 foot high, that would be able to house the museum and some of the items from our museum. And on the south wall, there would be actually two 12-foot exhibit sections that would also be 7 foot high, and they would be mirrored as well with glass shelving and glass casing around them. Anticipated amount estimated right now to make such a move would be right around $49,500. I also wanted to make mention of some of the other things that the museum has been involved with in Sioux Falls. Is we've actually never come before the city to request or ask for some additional funding to help us do anything. We've been very solid for our first few years, and one of the new projects that we'll be undertaking with the museum is we just recently received a grant for $10,000 that will transition a retired city transit bus into a traveling museum, which will take throughout the county of Minnehaha County and the surrounding counties in the state of South Dakota, as well as the surrounding areas as well. And the diagram in front of you is a look of which the bus will look like, to give you an idea. So we'll actually have all the exhibits there, and we'll be able to take the museum mobily to school systems and other areas and be able to have individuals walk through the museum and get a tour of the history. We'll also take traveling trunks and other information which we'll utilize in an assembly fashion and within a classroom setting, which will help to share the educational aspects of the museum. I look at the museum, and you can actually go to that last one, and I look at the museum as a great opportunity. We'll go past that one too, please. The museum also has in front of it a great opportunity to enhance some of the educational refinement of the African American history here in the state of South Dakota. With some of the budget cuts through education, I see that as being a huge resource here in the area. And if you look at some of the benefits for the museum, of course, it allow us this last year, we probably audienced about 10,000 individuals through presentations outside of the Multicultural Center. Very low population through the museum itself. But some of the benefits for the pavilion, it would also give Sioux Falls, I guess, another jewel in its crown to show some of the diversity and the distance that Sioux Falls and this community has traveled in the areas of diversity. For the city of Sioux Falls, it also allow individuals from the outside, as they look at Sioux Falls as maybe a stopping point or a career move, would enhance some of the character that's already here in Sioux Falls and speak to some of the diversity issues here. And for the pavilion, it would also be a chance for us to, we have a resident artist also, a couple actually, that we'd have a chance to showcase some of their abilities as well. And I guess today what we wanted to do is bring before you this thought process and ask the city if they would be willing to maybe co-labor or collaborate with us to make a move such as that.
Some questions.
And I'd like to answer any questions. I know it's a brief overview, but if there's any questions that we could address.
Councilor Aguilar.
Do you receive any funding from the city at the present time?
No, we do not.
You talk about traveling exhibits. Will you take these, or have you taken them outside of the city?
Yes, we've actually do a lot of outreach or educational processes outside the city. We do not, when we take those, typically we don't take a lot of the statues and information necessarily from the museum. We've kind of begun to collect an archive as well that we're able to use.
Thank you.
Yes.
Councilor Anderson.
Carl, explain if you would, some of the reasons why you're looking to make this move from the Multicultural Center to the Pavilion?
There's a variety of reasons. The Multicultural Center has been a great place for us and welcomed us and been a good place for us to start our process or the journey per se. But the audience that we would have access to in partnering with a pavilion would probably be about, I believe there's about 350,000, 360,000 guests annually that come through the pavilion. So it enhanced the visibility of the museum tremendously.
Access issues too between the Multicultural Center and the Pavilion?
Thank you for that lead there. Currently, where we're currently housed at, we don't have exhibits that are available for visibility on Saturdays, and it's primarily a 9 to 3 o'clock to run in coordination with the hours of the Multicultural Center. So it's hard to elaborate and bring people in during that time frame. It's kind of challenging.
Yes. Another thing I've heard from people just talking about the History Museum, and that is they question how much black history is actually in South Dakota. Could you expound on that a little bit?
Be glad to. Actually, for the state of South Dakota, I'm actually a resident of South Dakota, born and raised in the state. There's invaluable information that's available through research on the history of South Dakota. Everything from in Sioux Falls specifically to the building on Dakota Avenue, where was the first one of 2 integrated facilities here in Sioux Falls that allowed people during the 40s, the Negro population that came through the Army Air Base to live. You know, every aspect of U.S. history is reflected in South Dakota history as well, meaning that the Civil Rights era also affected Sioux Falls and South Dakota. I believe my father was probably one of the longest educators, had the most longevity as an educator here in the state of South Dakota, and he taught up in Flanders, South Dakota. Sully County is another treasure. If you want to look at Sioux Falls specifically, there's a cemetery right off of Cliff Avenue that has a variety of unknown individuals that have been buried there. Some of them are people of color. That there's a ton of research that could be done on that. 1942, 300 soldiers came into Sioux Falls, African-American soldiers with the 85th Aviation Squadron. Ton of research that could be done on that. And all this is, I mean, and there's even issues such as in the 40s when one of the pools here was during the segregated times, where the pool was drained after the African-American population was allowed to use it. So Monday through Thursday was for the white Sioux Falls citizens. On the weekend, 2 days, it would be for the black population. After that, they would drain it and refill it. So, I mean, there's issues of diversity, and to understand, not to point or poke someone's eye out with the information, but through us sharing, it should make all cultures aware of people and people's contributions, add self-esteem and pride to both sides of the coin, as well, all sides of the coin, as well as be a history and diversity, living diversity here in Sioux Falls, as well as South Dakota.
I just want to add one thing to this too, is that, you know, black history, African American history in South Dakota, you know, can be dated all the way back to the origins of this state, or even as a territory, starting with the Buffalo Soldiers protecting civilians and others moving through this state and through this territory. So I commend you guys on the work that you've done up to this point, and I hope that you're able to do a lot more in the future.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councilor Erpenbach?
Councilor Anderson, I'll see your Buffalo Soldiers and raise you the first black woman in the Black Hills.
Yes.
The first woman in the Black Hills.
Indeed.
Was Aunt Sally.
That's right.
And she was a black cook for the Custer Expedition. So it goes back way, way before.
Well,
this is awesome. Thanks for sharing the story.
could I just better that one, maybe, add to that?
Yeah, please do.
I believe that during the early exploration in the 1600s and 1700s, when the French and British owned this area, the Valverde expeditions that came in from Canada into this area, I believe that there was African American people that were involved with that. I mean, they came with Columbus. I would venture to guess that they came with other explorers into North America.
Sweet, thank you.
Thank you.
If I could, the idea of moving to the pavilion,
Yes.
I would think that the pavilion board would have to approve that, and then as well, the mayor probably would have to approve a use of the facility as well. And the board has got a thumbs up? Okay, and then I suppose the money.
Yes.
How much money are you looking for?
We estimated to be about $49,500 to build the exhibits, which would be a permanent fixture within the Washington Pavilion. So whatever would happen, those would be a permanent fixture there. And that would also include the cabinetry, the mirrored glass. I was actually just got a verbal final quote today from one of the preferred vendors over at the Washington Pavilion on the project.
How about the extended hours of operation now that you would have at your disposal? Would you cover that, or was that something that the pavilion as well would pay for?
We actually have not entered into the real details of how all things would work. I guess our thought was if we would be able to gain the assistance of the city, then working out those other details would be fairly minor. Our biggest, I guess, not to sound cliche, but our biggest concern or effort would be to find out if we could get financial support to make a move such as that. And I believe we could negotiate everything else out.
And if I have it right, somebody would have to come forward with a formal request for the funding. Larry could probably work that out and how that might have to come to us. But what about this bus? Is that a bus you already have? Is that something we're involved in?
No, actually, it was a bus that was granted to us a year and a half ago through the city.
Through the county.
Okay. And the space that you're leaving at the Multicultural Center, who would get that space back, or where would that go? Anybody?
Well, that space would be the Multicultural Center space.
Did you just
That's the
open up?
main entrance into the Multicultural Center, the lobby
Okay, yeah.
area, so that would just stay the way it is with them moving out. The other thing I want to say on this, too, is that one of their needs or reasons for moving also is that the very limited access that they have for people to be able to view the materials in the museum at the Multicultural Center. Because those front doors are always locked, it is difficult to get in there even during the regular Monday through Friday. So I think this is a big move for them and something they've been planning on, but it is something also the Multicultural Center supports.
Yes, they are very much in support.
If they decide to stay at the Multicultural Center, they're very welcome there also. But we support this group. We think that their work has been done, professionally, and they've done a great job from starting from basically scratch to get this project going again.
Very good. Good. Just in further discussion, maybe even with just probably isn't even needed, but what about all the other groups that may have a need for or a display like this? How do you determine yes and no, and how are you coming to those decisions? If I could, Mr. Toll.
Chairman Jameson, it really is looking at how we tie into our mission. This obviously will add additional resources for us so that as school groups come, we can tie the museum into some other things that we do as we plan with. So it'll be content oriented for schools as we work with them on their curriculum. The cases will be locked, so they will be able to display in these long areas. It's in the hallway on the first floor between the Belbus lobby and the main lobby. If you know where the Schulte room is there, from about the Schulte room coming to the east on both sides of the hall, those walls are hollow. And we have already taken panels out to look in there and make sure that there won't be any surprises. We know it's a pretty good, the void is open, and we'll be able to put the cases in. So they'll be able to change the material out, and then I would envision that if we had large school groups, we would try to get docents involved to be able to help us explain. So it's just adding to the collection we have.
Very good. Carl, anything else you'd like to add?
No, just appreciate you allowing us to present some information. Hopefully you look positively on that project.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, we do have a land use committee meeting next, and maybe the land use chair would like to give us a preview.
We are going to review rental housing registration, the rental housing registration process, and we're also going to start looking again at transit routes and trying to iron that out for the council and for the citizens. So hang around. We'll recess for 5 minutes and then roll into land use.
So if we could start land use at 5 after 5. Would give the clerks enough time to switch over and us to get prepared. Otherwise, anything else? All right, if seeing nothing, we are adjourned. Thank you.